It is 20 minutes after 12, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, joined by Lewis Goodall to pick over the bones of this week's PMQs. But before that, you will be here next week, of course, with PMQs, but you will be sitting in this chair, Lewis.
I know.
Goodall.
I'm your very own Oliver Dowden, I suppose, James, aren't I?
God,
I'm not sure what that says about... Do listen, listeners.
Do tune in. So you're doing it all week?
I'm doing it all week,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Lewis
Try
Goodall.
not to break it.
No, well, please, be gentle with them. That was pretty good from Angela Rayner for a number of reasons.
Yeah, it was very good. Look, it was a very well-constructed
Yes.
theme. It really, sometimes, with PMQs and the 6 questions, they can be a bit random. It sort of feels as if they're just sort of throwing...
She's had a lot of practice.
She's had quite a lot of practice now. And, the last couple were, they were fine, but, probably score draws. This one was a clear win for her because she did 2 things. She, first of all, to be honest, kind of showed him up a little bit in terms of the actual facts. She had a kind of litany of different sort of metrics and statistics, which he really didn't have an answer to. He said, well, we could trade on all sorts of areas of social policy, like important ones like child poverty, to which his answer was basically, well, here's my set of statistics, or we can trade statistics all day, which isn't especially satisfactory. And he responded with a series of pretty... not the most stellar jokes, I think it's fair to say. I don't think Friday night the Apollo's got anything to worry about anytime soon. But more than that as well, the overall framing, which was to take this, we have a bright spark in the deputy leader's office, whoever came up with this one, they can have an extra iron brew today. Because essentially, comparing it to the last time when the Prime Minister missed 2 in a row, John Major, 96, and that would have been more likely, by the way, because older listeners or PMQs, devotees will remember that back then it used to be twice a week. So it used to be on a Tuesday and a Thursday. So it was more likely if the PM was busy all week that would happen. And of course, basically setting up that the same questions, the same sort of questions were being asked back then by John Prescott to Michael Heseltine, setting up the idea that there is something inevitable about a kind of decline
very
under
clever.
Conservative governments.
Yes.
It was a smart conceit.
Great spot as well. And to come back to it at the end, when you talk about construction, there was a real... Because I think the 3 PMQs ago, 3 ago with Angela Rayner, she got a little waffly. She got a little lost.
Yeah, she kept to the point.
Providing commentary instead of the question. But then to come back to it at the end,
smart.
that was one of the sharpest PMQ tactics I think we've seen in a very long time.
Yeah.
And as you say, Dowden's jokes, they love hugging the money tree.
Apparently they were literally, someone was saying, who's actually in the parliamentary gallery, was saying that they are quite literally stuck to some post-it notes on the front of the binder. So you can see them coming, when people say you can see a joke coming a mile off, in this case you really can, because you can see him leaning towards the post-it notes, and irrespective of what has gone before, saying, I've got this other thing.
Love hugging the money tree. It'd be mildly forgivable if it had been off the cuff. And then, of course, accusing her of trying to audition for John Prescott's job, which she's already got.
She's already basically got, yeah. Not ideal.
Like that probably was off the cuff, bless him. That was, not great.
I think what it shows, right, is that there is right now, obviously politics is all about momentum, and Prime Minister's Questions is a reflection of momentum, and it does not feel, even if you're a Conservative supporter and you're listening to that, I think you would impartially say that it does not feel as if there are any real stinging lines of attack from the Conservative front bench. I felt for a long time now that they've basically been trying to recycle ones that have been extremely effective over the last 13 years, whether it's we heard it there, the magic money tree, there's a little bit now about Just Stop Oil. There's the kind of greatest hits, a roll call of greatest hits. There was, like I say, Coalition of Chaos, stuff that might once have been highly potent, but which now sounds very tired. It's like hearing a record that you once loved and you just sort of played it and played it and played it and played it again, and sooner or later you just kind of get sick of it. You just can't play it anymore.
In fact, on apropos precisely that, the first answer involved a bit of long Corbyn, didn't it? It was
Corbyn's another one.
Another, which was very, very effective when Boris Johnson was doing it, but just doesn't feel as sharp when...
And in a weird sort of way, it's ineffective on 2 fronts, which is that on the one hand, it's just ineffective because, like I say, it doesn't really land, doesn't feel particularly sort of germane to the moment that we're in. But more than that, it risks, one of the strongest charges against the government at the moment is that they're tired, that they're exhausted, they're politically, intellectually exhausted, they've got no ideas. They're living in the past.
Yeah.
And if you are quite literally recycling even political attack lines that were from your own sort of collection of greatest hits from sort of years gone by, it makes you sound like you're just not in the moment that we're in. So, look, these things, it's Deputy Prime Minister's Questions, it's not too problematic.
No,
but
sure.
It's symptomatic of a wider problem.
Exactly that. I'm told that Pete Wishart asked about the murals that we were talking about in the first hour of the programme. We may try and dig that out. Do you want to listen to a couple of exchanges from committee this morning? They're quite fun.
Well, yeah, little surprise. That's
well,
nice.
Simon Case, unexpectedly
Yes, he's been there.
perhaps, has been essentially distancing himself from that report into Sue Gray that ministers elected both to release against advice and to describe as prima facie evidence that she had behaved inappropriately. Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, addressing this directly. So let's have a listen.
The Akaba report noted that the government had provided no evidence that Ms Gray had breached impartiality rules in her conduct after initial contact with the Leader of the Opposition's team last autumn. Can you confirm that that is your understanding of the situation?
Yeah, absolutely can. Obviously not responsible for Akoba's words, but can be clear that we found no evidence that whilst employed as a civil servant, I mean actually at any point, but especially that time, Sue's advice was coloured by party political views or such factors. I mean, as the committee will know, Sue has had a long and successful career as a civil servant, I think 40 years or so, and has served governments of all colours. And through the process we went through, we discussed with officials and ministers, and nobody produced any evidence that could cast a doubt that Sue's advice was ever coloured by party political views.
And so in light of that, may I ask what your view is of the former Prime Minister's suggestion that her Partygate investigation was politically motivated and quotes, "It is no coincidence that she's gone to work for the Leader of the Opposition"?
Well, obviously I don't speak for the former Prime Minister, but I refer back, we found no evidence that that Sue's report was affected by party political considerations. And actually, I'm not sure the timeline as we now understand it from the material in the Akoba judgment quite works. I think, Sue's report was produced early in 2022. Her first contact, as we understand it from the material she's provided to Akoba, was in October 22, so seems to be a timeline, a gap as well.
Probably as close as Simon Case will come to calling Boris Johnson a big fat liar.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because what that I think reveals is the shifting sense of power in Westminster, in the sense that, look, Simon Case, there's no love lost between Sue Gray and Simon Case.
Well, that's yes, exactly.
There's no love lost at all. And there has even indeed been speculation that one of the reasons that Sue Gray decided to take this job with Keir Starmer is because she had been overlooked. She felt abandoned by Simon Gray during the Sue Gray inquiry. She felt that she didn't receive the cover and the sort of political support that she needed from the sort of civil service machine. So there's no love lost between them. But of course, Simon Case, like the rest of the civil service, they can see the polls just as much as the rest of us and are looking at them even more closely than the rest of us. And they are now starting to seriously think that in a year's time or 18 months' time, there's going to be a new sheriff in town.
And that
sheriff will be Sue Gray.
Yeah, good grief, yes.
Sue Gray will be the chief of staff in 10 Downing Street. So suddenly she will be, in effect, she won't be his superior as such, but she will be on a level with him. And so I suppose in a sense, I mean, there's lots of speculation about whether Case would survive that transition for very long. But, make no mistake, the civil service will already be starting to very quietly think about what that government might look like. And of course, as we get close to the election, there will be quite literally meetings between the civil service, the permanent secretaries and the shadow cabinet ministers to talk about their programme, what they might like to do. And so, Whitehall is very, very, it's nothing if not extremely alive to the wider kind of political winds, and that is part of that.
Nicely put. And in addition to that, the sort of realignment that's underway, he is confirming that the evidence and the timeline makes a complete mockery of Boris Johnson's attempts to claim that Sue Gray had behaved in any way inappropriately or biased. It's impossible to fit the facts to that claim. This is. Are we going to do this today? Are we ready? Okay. You're probably going to wonder what's going on now, Lewis. Dorries. It's now time for Dorries Watch. It is 33 days since Nadine Dorries promised to resign from the House of Commons with immediate effect. Nadine Dorries is still an MP, and she came up at this Select Committee meeting as well.
Are you aware of any rather forceful communications, it might be described, sent by the lingering member for Mid Bedfordshire to both to senior civil servants. Really, I suppose, threatening, it could be described, to use the platform of the Commons and indeed her own television programme to get to the bottom of why she hadn't been given a peerage.
So, yes, was aware of those communications and have flagged them to both the Chief Whip and the Speaker of the House.
Now, do you think that, have you maybe taken legal advice on whether you think the Honours Brackets Prevention of Abuses Act 1925 could come into play?
Seeking further advice on that question. So, taken initial advice but asked for more.
Gosh. So that's William Ragg. That'd be the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee. William Ragg, the chair, Conservative MP, of course. Just floating the possibility that Nadine Dorries might have broken the law?
Well, and have you seen, also the other Nadine Dorries news today, of course, is that she is to publish a book.
Called Lost the Plot, I believe.
The Plot.
I beg your pardon.
The Plot. Lost the Plot could be the sequel.
Yes.
To her account of the Boris Johnson's downfall, which I'm sure will be an impartial and entirely judicious review of events.
Helps us understand why she hasn't spoken in the House of Commons for a year.
Well, as you say, 33 days. I mean, it feels like the Elton John farewell tour was a long thing, but this feels longer.
Yeah, I think Simon Case referred to her as the lingering member.
The lingering,
which again speaks to your realignment analysis, doesn't it? Because he's not remotely interested in staying in favour with these people.
The Right Honourable and lingering member for Mid Bedfordshire.